Ladies and gentlemen, we are live, MythVision podcast. Let's check out the intro as everybody starts trickling in. We are MythVision. Welcome back to MythVision. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest, extra special than I typically do. And that is Rabbi Singer, Rabbi Tovia Singer. But first, go subscribe to his YouTube channel. You look up his name, Tovia Singer. You can check him out. Make sure you go and check that out and help support him if you guys are a fan of what he does. Also, we have the Patreon, hundreds of videos, early access. You keep the lights on. You keep bringing these type of things. We have wonderful stuff we're bringing, educating people, mostly centered on Christianity and going from there, of course, to the webinar that happens on December the 5th. Did the nativity story happen? Was Jesus really born of a virgin? Let's go see what Dr. Bart Dierman has to say. Join me there. I will be there. I might even be participating as some form of a host. So thanks a lot. Check it out in the description. And with that being said, Rabbi Tovia Singer, welcome to MythVision, my friend.
Hey, great to be on. And you've been having way too many Gentiles on your show, and it's time that a Jew shows up. No, it's true. Like, what's with it? Like, you like banning us? So I'm like the token Jew. Hey, come on. And this way he's covered. Look, I had him, and then we're fine.
I want everyone to know, not only are you funnier than every atheist I have I'm friends with. This is really why we have a friendship. You know what I mean? It's
not a high bar. Atheists are not the funniest people in the world. I don't know why, but atheists are just not. I don't know. They're upset about something. I don't know. Like, could be the church. I don't know what it is, but they're upset about something. The Jews are, more relaxed.
You guys are the funniest. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I want everyone to know I always value our friendship and our relationship in terms of what we do. You know, I look forward to seeing you in Israel at some point in the future, of course, to have you tour guide me and then, show me some of the areas, because it's not what you really do. But you said you would be willing to take me down there and take me to the spot where Jesus was born of a virgin, right?
Exactly. Where Jesus was born of a virgin. Yeah. As it turns out, I'm in Jerusalem, and we can walk to Bethlehem. It's just I don't know, like a 2-hour walk, an hour, depends how fast you're going, but we're really close to Bethlehem. It's all here in Judea. I mean, we're here, we're in it. So absolutely. And
I look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. We didn't plan on doing this live, actually, but this is the first opportunity I've had to be able to do this and hang out with you live. If you have a question, family, friends, feel free to super chat it. As long as it's respectful, I will entertain the super chat and entertain the question. That's all I ask of you, is to be respectful. I'd like to center the conversation on New Testament, first century ideas, especially when it comes to the Apostle Paul. I literally made the title of this, "Go Emasculate Yourself." It's a common phrase that I've heard you say when it comes to the Apostle Paul. So I figure, what better title than to have Paul's famous words be presented for the world to see?
Yeah. Well, that may strike the viewers as strange. It was not my idea, but but contained in probably the second most important letter of Paul, in Galatians 5, Paul has been excoriating his audience that are in modern day Turkey and Asia Minor about not following the law, not incorporating the law into their behavior as Christians. He doesn't use that term. And he's just going to make it very clear if you trust in circumcision, then Christ will avail you nothing. And then he's exploding in this idea in chapter 5, and he
Hmm.
ultimately says, if you feel do that, why don't you cut the whole thing off? And you have to bear in mind that Christians must believe that's the word of God. I mean, the church must believe that God inspired Paul, the same God who inspired Abraham in Genesis 17 to circumcise himself and his family, the, the God of Israel that conveyed the importance of circumcision, that he somehow inspired Paul to engage in this kind of um, I don't want to say grotesque rhetoric, although Paul had a mouthpiece on him where he refers to the law as basically, it's all excrement to me. So, Paul, this is not unusual for him. Paul
Hmm.
would use that kind of language. Paul has been running off at the mouth from Galatians 3 already, insisting, you foolish Galatians, who bewitched you with this idea that you should keep any of the law, making things up, ideas um, that the Torah was given by angels, Galatians 3:19, which is complete nonsense. There's nothing like that in the Torah. The idea is to minimize its importance, to claim that the covenant that God made with Abraham by faith preceded the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai by 430 years. He actually got the date right, but like God, there are two covenants in competition. That's what Galatians 3 is, and it ends with this the most important passage in the entire book, and that it's in the body of Christ that we're all one, neither Jew, Gentile, man, woman, all one, and he's going to continue on through chapter 6. So it's very very strong, and most germane is that any person who is familiar with the Hebrew Bible, with the Jewish scriptures, who has a intimate understanding of Tanakh, looks at this and immediately picks up on that this is not just a different orientation, which I think most people get. This is an, these ideas that Paul expressed are opposed by the prophets of Israel. So it's not just a different signature. It's just something completely different and opposes the core teachings of the Hebrew Bible.
Mm. Got a super chat already. So what we'll do is, because you can only hear me at the moment, and I'm going to get these super chats, pop them on the screen, read them out loud to you, and then have you answer. I also have a few questions myself that I'd like to ask you in pertaining to some of Book of Acts and other things. So first super chat, Charles Wilcox, thank you for the super chat, helping keep the lights on. And of course, we have a wonderful guest today. So he says, Rabbi, teach us of, and I might butcher some of these names, Gentiles with these Hebrew names. It's difficult. Teach us of a shlichim. I'm not sure how to SHLICHIM.
Shlichim, which means
Yes,
a messenger. Shluchim.
and a Bietdin, Bietdin, and how a sect like the Nazarenes would have used them in the first century. Do you know?
I just don't understand the question. The the Na, the the Nazarenes whose writings do not survive. I mean, I could just comment.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try to assemble this, and if I'm going off, so the Nazarenes are a very old group of Christians who were um, who certainly thought that you should be keeping the Torah, and who would have seen Paul as their most hated opponent, a group either very much like or the same as the Ebionites, who possibly looked at the book of Matthew, and not all of it, as the only gospel worthwhile. Um, so it could be then that when we see in the book of Acts that there's a conflict between different Christians. We're using the word Christians, although Christians do not identify as Christians in the Christian Bible, although on three occasions they're called that by non-Christians, but we just use that so it's a convenient term. So there is a clash that's recorded in the book of Acts where one view was that if you become a believer in Jesus, following you're following Judaism, and then you have to become a Jew and become circumcised. It means you just have to become a Jew. That's Judaism. So that would kind of like follow Luke 24:44, that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms, which means the writings. And this is all going to come to a head in the book of Acts in this very important ecumenical council. Not that I'm suggesting that this is historical, but as far as the book of Acts goes, this is very, very important. And what's at stake is that you have one group saying that in order to become a Christian, you have to become a Jew first. And let me just translate that for you in a way. So let me translate it this way. If somebody who's not Jewish said, I want to become a Hasidic Jew, you have to become a Jew to become a Hasidic Jew, right? You can't become a Hasidic person without being a Jew, right? So like it would be kind of that. So that was one group, and then you have the other group. And Paul is very important to the book of Acts. In fact, the book of Acts is essentially devoted to propping up Paul as that his Christologies are the most important Christologies. He is the leader of the church. His ideas prevail, and that everybody's kind of on the same page, but Paul's ideas prevail, and Paul's not a bad guy who was opposed to the law. And that's going to come up on many occasions, including the very next chapter in chapter 16. So it could very well be, let's now bring that question to a full circle, it could very well be that the Nazarenes are the same people as those who are proponents of circumcision and the keeping of the law for all new Christians who are former pagans, And this is also, and this also tells us that probably in the 50s, that's not when Acts is written, but in the 50s, it's largely non-Jews who are becoming Christians and not Jews. There were some, but it was largely a Gentile affair. So that's where I think this all comes in. One caveat, and that is nothing that the Nazarenes wrote survives. We have nothing. So all we have, you want to know about the Nazarenes, the Ebionites, you've got to read about them from their opponents, because the only writings that survive that were copied are those who are the Orthodox or the proto-Orthodox. So that's how you can put this all together, and you will see that explode in Acts 15.
So, Rabbi, if we could, is it possible to bump your audio up just a smidge? People are saying you're a tad bit low compared to me. I even lowered my volume a little bit to accommodate.
Yeah, let me do this over here. It's probably best if I just bring the mic up there.
And if I could, the audience, let me know if my audio levels and his are about the same. I want to match, and I don't want.
Is this all right?
You sound good to me, so I want to make sure that everybody is on the same level with that. So let's see. Can we get a thumbs up from people, or a one? Just type a one. Let us know if everything is better.
Does that work? I should. Is that
you
all right?
Good.
The audio is good. All right, we're all set to go.
Awesome. All right. So let me get in a question of my own as I'm getting into these super chat questions. Don't worry. I see you Pondering Jew and Matthew Pop and going from there. But in Acts, so Acts chapter 16 states that because Timothy was half Jewish and half Greek, Paul had to circumcise him to appease some Jewish Christians. Does this seem realistic given Paul's own account of his own views, if you will, on circumcision?
So, as your viewers could probably guess by now, Paul is not going to mention this in any of his writings because this does not fit well with with Galatians 4, 5, 6, any of Galatians. So this is not answering the question, but here you see that the oral tradition of the Jewish people was normative at that time. Some people think like Orthodox Jews, Pharisaic Jews, like invent our ideas, this oral tradition. But here you see, just as an aside, no one mentions this. I think it should be put forward that here you see that it is the mother that determines Jewish identity in the Christian Bible, not the father. This is very critical. And here you see it here in the case of Timothy. Is it historical? Can't know, because this is consistent with what Acts is seeking to project. The book, whoever wrote the book of Acts, we know wrote the book of Luke, but who is it? We don't know. Whoever wrote the book was very interested in conveying that Paul is the leader. I mean, it should be called it's called the book of the Acts of the Apostles. It should be called the book of the Acts of Paul, and that Paul really was not an enemy of the law, and Paul was on board with the law, and therefore the story of publicly circumcising a fellow who had a Jewish mother and a non-Jewish father, um, I can say if it's historical. There's nothing. There's nothing to compare it to. It would make sense. There's no reason in the world that the writer of the book of Acts would introduce a controversy that was boiling in the early church if it didn't exist. So we can be certain, and though that word is not often associated with history, but we can be sure that there was enormous controversy not over Paul's opinion and personality and the kind of person he was, but between Christians who thought that you had to keep the law and Christians who thought, no, the law you don't have to keep any longer. And this plot device with Timothy may very well have been historical. I don't buy it, but it could have been, and I don't buy it because it's the kind of device that the author of Acts wants to promote. Strangely, let's just show something a little different. Let's just spin this the other way. So in Acts 15, where you have the ecumenical gathering, where you have, everybody gets together, Peter, Paul, they're all there, right? And the question of, do former Gentiles who now become Christians, do they have to be circumcised? And circumcised in the New Testament is not just the commandment of circumcision, but sort of bleeds onto all ritual commandments. So do people who become Christians need to keep all ritual commandments? And it is resolved that they only have to keep what we call today are the Noahide laws. That they have to only keep those commandments that are incumbent on people who are not Jewish. In Judaism, there are commandments that only the non-Jews must keep in order to be righteous in the eyes of God. That's why we don't try to convert anybody, because a person doesn't have to be Jewish to be saved. So what's critical here is that in Acts 15, it is resolved that it is forbidden for new Christians, Gentiles, meaning people who are not Jewish by birth, but who have adopted the Christian faith, that they not eat from the meat that was offered to idols. And that's absolutely forbidden to a non-Jew. If you see an animal that was offered to whatever monkey god, you can't eat from it. It's absolutely forbidden. So that's stated explicitly, unambiguously in the book of Acts. But when we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 8, 1 Corinthians is no doubt from the hands of Paul, no question. And 1 Corinthians 8, Paul is asked that question, like, can we eat? He's being asked by churches, can we eat, or a church, can we eat from sacrifices that are offered to idols? And he goes, well, if you know that the idols are nothing and mean nothing, and I'm paraphrasing here, then you could, because it's nothing anyway, right? Well, that completely contradicts Acts. So we can extract from this that Paul is not following anything of what we find in Acts 15. And that Acts 15 is introduced as a device to say everybody really is on the same page. And that's why you can find in 2 Peter 3:15. And why is like Paul put in there? Peter and Paul are on the same page. Why? Why do you need that? It's all an apologetic, because Peter and Paul are definitely not getting along in Galatians 2 as an example. Different views in the book of Acts.
Awesome. Wonderful response. Got a couple super chats. Pondering Jew, and forgive me, I'm going to try and pronounce this. You guys know I'm horrible at it. Shalom from Jerusalem. Rabbi, how can Christians look past simple historical mistakes in the New Testament, like placing Maris Hamempshpelah in Shechem or Shem?
Mind blowing.
I am really. Do you understand that, or do I need to?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'll explain it.
Okay, please.
Mind blowing. I don't know if in all my, and I've been broadcasting a long time, I don't know if anyone ever asked that question before.
Interesting.
You know how what I'm about to say, you will definitely have heard of. So what he's talking about is the Maris HaMachpelah. I should just translate that. And the Maris HaMachpelah is the tomb in which Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried along with their wives. Rachel's buried in Beis Lechem in Bethlehem. Okay, so that's in Hebron. Hebron, so you just understand logistically, I can walk to Hebron from Jerusalem. It's really close. You have to pass Bethlehem to get to Hebron, but if you're looking at a map, it's all in Judea. It's like right in same thing. I mean, it would be a whole day walk to walk there, but it's really close. Okay, that's where the tomb of the patriarchs there, and that's where hundreds of thousands of people visit every year. I mean, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah are buried there. It's big. It's the building it's in. The building it's in today is one of the oldest operational buildings in the entire world. It was built, the outer structure today is 2,000 years old, was built by Herod. So this is a really important place. It's the second holiest place in all the world after Jerusalem. I mean, Hebron is the place essentially where Judaism was born in a certain sense. Abraham emerges, where David, King David, began his kingship. His palace began in Hebron and only moved to Jerusalem later on during his 40-year reign. So this is like what I want to convey to you is the importance and centrality of Hebron. Okay. You got that all? This is not like anybody is buried there. This is not Grant's tomb, and then 90% of people don't know who Grant is. Like they heard of him, but they don't know for sure. This is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. This is so important that Herod the Great had nothing better to do but build a tomb around the existing tomb, which is there, which is used, and I'm there very, very frequently. It's visited by, I don't know how many people, but just rest assured, everybody knows where it is. You got the setup? Now, the reason why this setup is vital is you often hear from Christian apologists that you could tell from Luke that he had an intimate familiarity with the land of Israel. He knew there were sycamore trees over here, and they knew there were oak trees here, and if you go like this, there was a tree, and there was a cloud. They knew what kind of coin they were using. You see, Luke, he had such a knowledge of what was going on in Israel at the time. He knew if somebody coughed, he knew which way to say Gesundheit. He knew I hear this, and I'm going, like, really? That's it? Like, I could know what's going on in Hong Kong without whatever. But I'm going, the author of Luke knew so little that he didn't know where the Maris HaMachpelah is, where the tomb of the patriarchs is. And he places the tomb of the patriarchs not in Hebron, which is, as I said, just south of Jerusalem. It's really close, but in Shechem, like 100 kilometers north, like way off. That's not like Long Island is not technically part of New York City, but it's like really close. And you can say, I'm from New York. No, it's nothing like that. It's Shechem. Modern day, it's called Nablus. That's a monument. It's not an error. You can't, if somebody says that the Empire State Building is in San Diego, then you pretty much know that this person has no idea. I mean, to say,
I have to say though, when I went to Kuwait one time, I was over there for contract work, and
we should have met up. Kuwait's my favorite place. This is where I go all the time. Whatever.
It's 2010. Well, they were like, "Where are you from?" I said, "North Carolina," and they're like, "New York." Like they automatically just knew it was New York.
This can't be. This is like saying the Grand Canyon is located in Chicago. This is not. No, this is so. That's the point. This is much more. This is the Grand Canyon is located in New York. That means This is massive. By the way, a footnote for those of you who don't understand the size of the land of Israel, it's tiny, really tiny. I mean, you wouldn't know that because we make the headlines all the time. You'd think we're as big as China. We're not. Really, really small. Like, Israel is so tiny that it's like one of the only countries in the world that when you're looking at a globe, the names of the cities are in the Mediterranean because they can't actually fit into the place. Like, yeah, it's in the blue because you just can't fit Jerusalem and Hebron in it. So you're always like, the names are all in the Mediterranean Sea. It's a really tiny place. Okay, 25,000 square, not miles, but kilometers. It's really small, just very tiny. And these are really far away in terms of Israel. And these are very important places, meaning Shechem, Nablus, is where Joseph was buried. It's a really important place in the Bible. It really comes up a lot. So that means that this is not a like you say if North Carolina, someone in Kuwait says, oh, that's New York. Because like what's North Carolina? Someone think these are really significant places. Both are, and they're really, I mean, Shechem is up in the north, way up in all the way up in Samaria. Hebron is in the heart of the Holy Land, in the heart of Judea. It's like smack in the middle of Judea. So they couldn't be more further apart. And the question I pose is that here's what I'm saying. So the author made, this is not just small, this is a monumental error. But here's my point. So people make mistakes. Fine. I want to just sort of push this along. People make mistakes. Mistakes happen. Do not argue that the author of Luke was intimately familiar with the land of Israel. Stop that. It's nonsense. Stop arguing that, on the road from Jericho with the Good Samaritan, whatever, he knew there was certain kind of trees in this area and this area, and the steep incline was this. It's all nonsense. If you say that the Empire State Building is located in San Francisco, then you have no clue because that's a really important landmark in a very important city. But they're at two ends of Interstate 80. And Interstate 80, for those of you who are not from the United States, it's just a really big road. I mean, you can just start at the George Washington Bridge, and I think wind up at San Francisco. But it's like 3,000 miles apart. It's two ends, very different. All right, so the only thing they have in common is they both vote blue. That's it. So stop. So I'm saying this, that the Christian apologists need to do what you want. And I watch this, and I'm going, like, what? Like Luke knew about what kind of coinage they use. This is a very important place, the land of Israel. This is the land of Israel technically is Southwest Asia. I can walk to Europe. Got it? And I can walk to Africa there because we have a Suez Canal. Well, it means Israel really is the connector of these three continents and the Mediterranean Sea. If anything moved in the ancient world, it was the Mediterranean Sea. This is really an important place.
And he gets that wrong. Yeah.
To get that wrong about Israel, this is not, getting it wrong about, I don't know, Zululand. This is a really significant place. Okay. I didn't mean to throw a tantrum on air, but
no. That was
no
was
one
a great
raises
question.
this. Like no one, right? Like you've heard this apologetic that Luke was for. I'm not going to mention them by name, but I hear it all the time. Oh, they knew the geography, they knew the coin. How did he know? Like he didn't know that. That's humongous.
Yeah, thank you for that response. Next super chat, Matthew Pop. Thank you. Random question. Is there anything in Jewish literature that says Jesus was a member of the Sanhedrin, assuming he was a rabbi?
No. Did I say no? No.
Thank you.
Do have no. You do. All right. First, disclosure: there is a huge controversy over whether the Jesus mentioned in the Talmud is the Jesus of Christianity. Okay, and you go, well, what do you mean? Like, how many people with the name Jesus? I mean, all right, he's the first baseman for the Chicago Cubs, but like, how many people? If these jokes are too much, but
no, keep laying
so
along.
actually,
man.
a name like Yeshua or Yeshu, that's like Josh instead of Joshua, just truncated. Right? So the consensus is that the Jesus in the general consensus, there are really people who there's good reason not to believe this, but it probably is the same person. Okay, so you would not be crazy if you said Beethoven was the greatest writer of classical music, but some of you may say it's Bach, whatever that may be. So in the Talmud, you have quite a number of men. Jesus is mentioned quite a number of times. A person like Yeshua would come up a lot, but it's there. Okay. So so we have texts that say that Jesus, let's just say Jesus, was a student of a very great rabbi. His name Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachio. And so therefore he would be close to people who were in the highest order of teachers. These are the writers of the Mishnah, which is a part of the Talmud, which is the early rabbinic sources that, let's say, from 150 BCE let's say, till 250 CE. So these are really the supreme rabbis. Now, so therefore he would have had some connection to it. He is never characterized positively. He comes off terribly. Here's the interesting thing that connects to the mythicism. And Orthodox Jews are generally not mythicists.
Right.
In fact, I don't know of any that are. But but mythicists do seize this point because Rabbi Shua ben Prachia, as an example, lived about in the 1st century BCE, so that like 100 years before the Christian period, before Jesus was walking around and preaching based on the Gospels. So if that's the case, then in fact, Jesus lived 100 years before Christians say he lived. So tangentially, this is very interesting. But no, he's not part of the Sanhedrin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Doc Pleroma. Doc Pleromana. Thank you for the super chat. How on earth does Luke have Jesus read Isaiah 61 from the Septuagint? And remember when I said Septuagint? Remember when I used to say Septuagint, Rabbi? I had to get that in the middle. Anyway, yeah, how on earth does Luke have Jesus read Isaiah 61 from the Septuagint in Luke 4:17? Seems a little taboo to have a Greek scroll being read. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think so. You're talking about Luke 4:16, 17, where Jesus is reading from the scroll in Nazareth, and it's, please don't be offended, but quite the contrary. He is not reading from a Greek text. He's in a synagogue. He's reading a text from Isaiah chapter 61, and he's reading from the Hebrew. There's nothing in the text that he's reading. He's not reading in Greek. Forget that. He's reading in Hebrew. That's how it's presented. I mean, the story may have never happened.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
That means I'm just putting that aside. But what we encounter in Luke 4 is Jesus going into the synagogue and reading from the prophets, which is done on every Shabbat. If he's reading from the prophets in a synagogue, which means it's an official reading, it's the reading, meaning capital R reading, he's definitely reading in Hebrew. Definitely. That means that's what Luke is suggesting. And he reads a variant of Isaiah 61, and that's the variant where it has "and gives sight to the blind," which isn't in the Hebrew text. But we'll set that aside for a moment. But this demonstrates that as far as the New Testament authors are concerned, there's no Greek text going on. And Jesus isn't speaking Greek to anyone. Now, we know that he is, and if you'll ask me why we know that all this stuff really is originally Greek and not Hebrew, I'll address that. But this is all going on in this. What Luke wants the reader to believe is that Jesus is engaged in a very well-known ceremony, and that ceremony is reading from the scroll of the prophets. Absolutely, that's in Hebrew. That would not be in Greek.
Thank you for the super chats, everybody. MT, Shalom, Rabbi Derek. Will the and the question is to you, of course. I think it's just saying shalom to me and you. Will the Messiah be direct descendant of King David and next in line to the throne? Is it possible that Yeshua ben Joseph was the above and thus creating the movement?
Okay, so I don't think I got the second part. The first part is that the Mashiach, the Messiah, must be a descendant of King David. In fact, he's called David in Tanakh, and he's the fulfillment of a Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16. Now, one of the first parts, the answer is yes. The reason why Jesus can't be the Messiah is not from his parentage. I mean, I could submit to you that the moment Matthew and Luke, at the same time in different places, claimed that Jesus was born of a virgin, then they then sabotage the idea that he could be the Messiah as an aside, because in order to be the Messiah, which means anointed, you have to have a human Jewish father who's not only from the tribe of Judah, but from the house of David. If you have no human Jewish father, I mean, I want to set aside whether a virgin birth would not be in the scheme of things, the biggest miracle in the world. But the point is, it then nullifies the possibility of Jesus being from the house of David, and the genealogies that we find in Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 3 are worthless, because those genealogies that we find in the New Testament's two infancy narratives are genealogies that are tracing Joseph's line, Joseph's putative line, not Jesus. So it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So, but the reason why Jesus is not the Messiah is because he accomplished nothing that the Jewish scripture says the Messiah will accomplish. Changing the world to one faith, all the nations speaking in a pure speech. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. A worldwide knowledge of God, where the knowledge of God will cover the world as the water covers the sea. Isaiah chapter 11, you find a similar passage in the book of Habakkuk, followed by the resurrection of the dead. That's explicitly in Tanakh. A peace, nations will take their implements of war and turn them into implements of agriculture. The bloodiest religious war in human history was carried out by Christians killing each other. 30-year war from 1618 to 1648, Germany was eviscerated. 8 million people were killed, and they were all Christians killing each other. I mean, hello. I mean, you think that this is too fantastic to believe. It is just like there's the teachings of Christianity and the way the world looks bears no resemblance to what Isaiah, Micha describe will unfold in the Messianic age. It's not like when the Messiah comes, please God, he'll come soon, that we'll say, wait, not so fast. We need to see your ID. What tribe you're from? We know he's from the house of David. We will know he is the Messiah because the world will be dramatically transformed. And none of those events, the temple wasn't built, in fact, destroyed in the first Christian century. None of those events occurred. And all Christians can do is blame it on a second coming, an idea that conveniently, successfully explains away any false Messiah. Then it's anybody. My sister-in-law could be the Messiah, but she didn't do anything. That'll be the second coming. So, I mean, then anybody could be. Who could be,
Maybe I am.
Right. Maybe you are. That's it. You just need a haircut, the circumcision. We'll take care of the whole thing.
What are you trying
to say?
That's
the key.
No,
yeah. What's with the haircut?
Oh, you don't like it? You don't like it? Okay.
Did you lose a bet? What happened? What happened? Tell me.
Let's just put it this way. My wallet just got thicker. Okay.
So there it is. So the key is that there's right the virgin birth that finds itself in the infancy narratives of Matthew, Luke. There are 89 chapters in the Gospels. Okay, 4 of them, 2 Luke, 2 Matthew, contain the infancy narratives. That's all. And those are late. They're written in the 80s, right? Probably about the same time. And they are, by claiming Jesus was born of a virgin, then making it impossible for him to be the Messiah. I mean, that claim is dead in the water.
Thank you for that. I
I
appreciate
could
it.
take this further. I just don't want to
I know.
overwhelm.
We've got more super chats too. And let me take one of my questions real quick and we'll get to the next super chat. Paul states in Galatians 4:4 that Jesus was, quotation, born of a woman, and quotation, born under the law, if you will. But some translators render the second reference as come under the law. Is the Hebrew expression born of a woman an idiom for a human being, i.e., let's say Job 14:1, 15:14, 25:4? And then also, are Jews considered to be under the law as soon as they are born, or do they come under the law when they become active observers of Torah, i.e., from the day of their circumcision, which eighth day?
All right. So in Tanakh, the term born of a woman or the son of man are terms used to convey that someone is human and not divine.
Just simple, just that simple, right?
Really, really.
Wow.
Crazy that Daniel 7:13, one like the Son of Man will come with the clouds of heaven. Like Jesus is not the Son of Man. According to Matthew and Luke, he's the son of a woman, not a man. The point of this term used, son of man, son of woman, is to convey that they're human, not more. They're not divine, or they're not like angels, you know. So that they're not metaphysics. That's the whole point. When Ezekiel in the opening chapter describes an ecstatic vision of the divine chariot and the heavenly abode, there's no parallel to it. Isaiah 6 doesn't really come close, but it just Ezekiel chapter 1 is just 28 verses of just ecstatic prophecy. So when God addresses Ezekiel in verse right at the end of beginning of chapter 2, right away, he addresses him as son of man. Like, don't think the warning, do not think that Ezekiel was divine in any way to have that kind of an experience. So that's what's being conveyed.
Now the born under the laws, the other
The born under the law, we don't use that term. That is because, okay, so the word Torah doesn't mean law. The word Torah means teaching. In fact, this will seem strange. In the Jewish Bible, the word Torah, when it appears, far more frequently refers to the word teaching, means teaching, and does not refer to the 5 books of Moses. There are examples of it where it does, but the vast majority of the Torah means teaching. And when you take a delicious word like Torah and you render it law, so obviously the idea is to portray it in the way that is not flattering, and that's Paul's point. And then I want to just, this is too interesting. Romans 7 is a very interesting chapter because it's autobiographical. Paul is writing to people he has never met. Romans, unlike the other 6 indisputed letters of Paul, is written to a church that Paul had not yet visited when he wrote it. And in it, he is addressing Jews, which is not typical in Paul's letters. He's speaking to Jews and Gentiles. But in Romans 7, he's speaking to his fellow Jews. And he says something very interesting, and people miss this. He says, first of all, he's saying that you don't need to keep the law anymore, using the example of a woman who's married and then she's bound to her husband under the law of marriage, bound to him. But once he dies, she's then free of that marital vow. And in the same way, you, the Jews, are not bound by the law any longer. And here's where it swings in very. Paul says that, before I knew about the law, I wasn't the law, when it was only when I discovered the law, paraphrasing here, I mean, at some point he finds out about the law that sin entered him, and then he was convicted, and then he was then under the law. Now, this is very interesting because Paul claimed that he was always in it. Like, at what point did you not know about the law and then found out about it? See, here we see that Paul was not a Pharisee. This is, by the way, the least of the top 10 reasons, but this is very significant. If you're growing up in an Orthodox Jewish, that's the same thing as a Pharisaic house, the same thing, means the same thing. You're raised in Judaism from the time you could speak, and speaking Hebrew is your mother language, and you could just read. There's no point where you go, "Whoa, Sabbath, when did that happen?" And you're, no, that doesn't happen. My earliest memories are what a Sabbath table was in my home, celebrating it, and things that we enjoyed doing on the Sabbath day we didn't do the whole week, and those are things that we ought not to do on the Sabbath day because it's a holy day and set aside. You don't like discover this at your bar mitzvah. So that's very revealing. So Paul is going to use that because at some point if he is from Tarsus, if he really, and Tarsus is one of the centers of Greek reflections in the reflection in the ancient world. So that would then make sense that he grew up in the Hellenized world, came into contact, exposed to the Torah. There's something about Paul that made him feel like his very ashamed of his wretched body. This is the language that Paul uses at the end of Romans 7. And we could speculate on what Paul was so ashamed of and what broke him and what made him feel like such a sinful creature. We can explore that together. And it's not hard to untangle that. So this is Pauline language, and it certainly does not comport. It doesn't fit with someone who was born into a religious Pharisaic home, and that's all you knew, and then that nothing about that fits. So yeah, I mean, the longest chapter in all of the Bible is Psalm 119, 176 verses. The whole thing is about how beautiful the Torah is, how beautiful is observing the Torah. It's written in a way with an acrostic method so that you can memorize it easily. It's like it bears no resemblance to Torah Hashem Temima, the Torah of God is perfect. Meshivas Nefesh, it restores the soul. Edus Hashem Ne'amona, the testament of God is trustworthy. Machimas Pesi, it makes the foolish wise. Psalm 19. I mean, take that and just compare it to Paul, and you're like, whoa, these are really, this is not like reading, like the difference between reading Paul Johnson and reading Mark Twain, and they have a different style of writing, and you can identify. No, this is like a total different thing. This is Karl Marx
So to put it simply, as we get into the next super chat, is born under the law seems very foreign, is what you're suggesting. This does not sound like something a typical Jew would even be saying.
Right. That's right. That means, right. Paul is like also talking about Paul is talking about himself also, and he, famously in Galatians 1 and 2, famously in Philippians 3, famous, and talking about that, circumcised on the 8th day. Have you ever met a Jew in your life that, hello, I've been circumcised on the 8th day, an event which you couldn't possibly recall as part of your CV? This is not the way people talk. And you're going, well, maybe people don't today. No, they don't talk that way. I gotta say this. So if you're an English speaker, then this show is going to do well for you. But if you're an English speaker, you might not realize that if you listen to Middle English or Old English, if you listen to someone speaking in, let's say, the way English was spoken in the 13th century, you wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand any of it. You have no clue. Okay, Chaucer, no clue. You wouldn't understand. This is not Jacobean English. I'm talking about going back to the original King James. That means King James you would understand. It's just using there are anachronisms and punctuation difference, but you can understand it. You would not. Any religious Jew could walk into the Israel Museum, the Shrine of the Book, walk into the Rockefeller Museum, which contains the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, Dead Sea Scrolls are not just scripture; it's also writings, letters, all sorts of documents that most believe were preserved by Essenes in the Qumran area. Okay, any religious Jew could open up a document, look at a text that was written nearly 2,200 years ago, and read it and understand it and make complete sense. You understand that? I mean,
Hmm.
we understand it. I mean, when you go, well, modern Hebrew, get that out of your mind. An Israeli person who speaks modern Hebrew would understand biblical Hebrew pretty much. There are anachronisms. There are certainly,
Right.
but they would get exactly what's going on.
Right.
So this is not like, so you have to just bear that in mind. This is a language, it's a holy language to the Jewish people and to much of the world, and this is something that's very well preserved. And people don't go. There's no document in the Dead Sea Scrolls where someone says, "And I was circumcised on the 8th day." This is kind of language that someone is really boasting about their um, about who they are. And Paul would need to. This is an apologetic. This is where I want to go. Paul had many enemies. He personally didn't get along with people. He should have, fellow Christians. Paul is arguing throughout his letters with fellow Christians, not that much with Jews at all. It's Christians. Those are the people he's arguing with. And he's saying my Christology is correct and theirs is wrong.
Hmm.
So you can figure out that what other people are saying about him. In the book of Acts, we know that the very guy who introduces Paul to the Jerusalem church, Barnabas, who Paul should have really been indebted to, like, is having this big problem with. And Paul won't travel with John Mark. No way that was made up. There's a guy who just, you ever meet people who just can't get along with anyone?
Yep.
You've met people like this. People just this is the personality. This is not just a criteria of embarrassment. I mean, no one would invent this kind of stuff. So that's really what's going on. And Paul, therefore, has to amp up his importance. That what he has is directly from Jesus Christ. He didn't get this from Jerusalem. He refers to
The
the
others have
supposed
not contributed anything to
right,
him. Right.
nothing. It's all, and he's a super apostle, and therefore, what I say is trustworthy, even if it goes against the Jerusalem church. And he claims that he told Peter to his face that he's a hypocrite in Galatians 2:11 in
Mm.
Antioch. Like really? Well, isn't it interesting that he called Peter a hypocrite, but Paul is saying that, in fact, you can do that. You can behave like a Jew when you're around Jews and behave like a Gentile when you're not around Jews. 1 Corinthians 9:20-22. That's why Paul couldn't stand Peter, because that's exactly the behavior he engaged in.
Now I know
So
why
Paul,
fundamentalist Christians don't like you.
like, but none of the I'm saying here is like complicated. This is
No,
all
I get it.
very straightforward. Like, I'm not like, this is like,
Yeah, I get it. I got some more super chats, Rabbi. This has been a blast. Kyle DeFranco, thank you so much for the super chat. Russell Gamerican, I think you're talking about, says starting 2 Samuel, the Tanakh blames the North for problems in the South. Maybe the New Testament is just the Northern response to those smears. I very much doubt that. But do you have a thought? Do you have any clue what the question is pertaining to?
no, it means that I don't know what we're referring to here, but the Northern Kingdom does not exist during by in the Second Temple at all, so that bears no resemblance. Um, you may think about like tension between the North, the Galilee area, and Jerusalem.
That's
And
possible. Yeah,
yeah, that's
it's possible. But it's
well, I
not
mean,
us.
anybody would concede that Jerusalem was the center of and remains the center of all Jewish life and the holiest place on earth for the Jewish people. And in the north, you did have people who were largely uneducated. Who it's a rural area,
Yeah.
and if you live, fishing villages. Um, I mean, being a craftsman and so on, a tecton, either Jesus, well, it could be both, I guess. But we're told only in Mark that Jesus was a carpenter, and of course in the other, in Matthew, it's Joseph and so on. But that you would expect to find a much higher level of literacy in Jerusalem. That's the center of everything.
Right. And this next super chat, and thank you, Kyle, for that one, kind of ties in. Anubis Fire, thank you for the super chat. Do the Samaritans play any role in the Christology of Paul? We hear so little about them.
So the Samaritans were our real enemies. And for most people, this is a what? Like, I was born in Good Samaritan. And it's because the Samaritans, although technically today there are, I don't know the number, if there are 1,000 of them left, but they're here still. But today it's a museum piece, right? But the Samaritans are a group brought into the land of Israel by the Assyrian Empire. Their policy was to move populations when they conquered a nation. If America was conquered by Russia, China, the people of America would eventually rise up because they're attached to the land. So the idea, is brilliant idea, was to move populations. When the Northern Kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrian Empire, finally by Sanheriv, uh, this happens during the reign of Chizkiyahu, so they're carried away. The people who replace them, like who does he bring in, are the Samaritans. Samaritans now are in a new land and they find themselves under lion attack. And they attribute their misfortune that they just belong to the wrong religion and they should belong to the indigenous religion, Judaism. But that is not a good enough reason to join the Jewish faith. So the Jews didn't recognize their conversion as sincere, let alone they rejected almost all the prophets and goes on and on. The Samaritans were in a group in the land of Israel that were hostile to Jews and Judaism, but you wouldn't know that today. And moreover, you have the story of the Good Samaritan, a grotesque story in the book of Luke, where this, I mean, people don't get why this is, the force of this story is so powerful and affects the way Christians think about Jews. The Samaritans are people who are not indigenous peoples to the land of Israel, but are brought into the land of Israel. And the Jews don't regard them as genuine Jews because they don't embrace Judaism properly for the right reasons. They don't accept the prophets for a whole host of reasons. And there's just turmoil between us and the Samaritans who think that the holy mountain is Mount Gerizim in the north in Samaria, not Jerusalem, right where I am in the middle of the country. That story comes up in the book of John with the Samaritan woman.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, when Jesus says to her, your fathers don't want what they're talking about, and salvation is of the Jews. Why such strong language? Because this is a really big issue. This is a really big issue. So in the Christian Bible, the Pharisaic Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, is the gold standard, always is. The Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses, Matthew 23. The Jews are the worst people in the world, meaning the Pharisees are the horrible hypocrites, vipers, all that stuff. But what they are conveying, their oracles, are directly from God. The salvation is of the Jews comes from that. People think salvation is of the Jews, emerged from like the Jews gave us Jesus and therefore salvation comes from Jewish people. That's not the context. The original context says that the Jews know what they're talking about and your fathers don't, meaning the Samaritans. Samaritans had, there was just inner fighting this will come up in the Bible where we're trying to build a second temple and the Samaritans are participating in trying to make sure that the Jews don't successfully build the second temple under the Persian Empire. They're really enemies. They're real enemies. That's why the story of the Good Samaritan, Luke, is designed, is crafted to make the Jews look as horrible as possible. Because the priest passes by and the Levite passes by and they don't want to help the guy who's on the road between Jericho and Jerusalem. But along comes the Good Samaritan who means the enemy guy, the non-Jew, the person who's the most, he does. And these stories affect the way Christians think about Jewish people. So that plays a huge role. God bless Dr. King. In his last speech, sometimes when I run, I walk every day. Sometimes I want to listen to something. One of the things that I listen to is Dr. King's speeches. And in his last speech before he was murdered in Memphis in 1968. So his last speech is really magnificent. And in it, he was quite knowledgeable of the Jewish Bible. He was really quite a scholar. And he had just a tremendous affection for Jewish people. He just loved Jews for some reason. He really was quite enamored with the Jew in a very genuine way. And I've never said this publicly. So in his speech, he actually goes through this explanation of the Good Samaritan of why would the priest not want to help the guy out. And he says, well, maybe they thought it was just a ruse or a setup. and they were afraid that there's a guy laying there as though he's dead, and he, Dr. King just couldn't get an anti-Semitic word out of his mouth. Very unique personality. So his spin on it, his spin on it is very interesting. But the Samaritans were really the hostile group in the country, and therefore their elevation is the denigration of the Jews. It's always about character, not about knowledge. But the oracles always come from the Jews. Romans chapter 3, verse 2.
So, in the vein of that, I guess that question, something to pose just before we move on to the next super chat is, the story of the prodigal son.
Yes.
This sounds like it's trying to harp on that division when it talks about one of the sons who goes off into a land in the pigsty and then comes back. And the one son who's like obedient, I think sounds like the Jew. And
Right.
here you have this son who can go do whatever and then come back. I wonder if that is a Samaritan. It doesn't say it, but I'm not saying that that is a literal parable of what a literal person.
Let's unhitch that and rehitch it. That's the Gentiles.
Okay.
That's the Gentiles. But here's the crazy thing. Oh, this is so interesting. There are times in the Christian Bible where the author is seeking to make a point. And the author will sometimes seek to make a point and completely abandon Christology in order to make the point. Like Luke, as an example, begins with an introduction to Zachariah and Elizabeth, the mother and father of John the Baptist, right?
Right.
And wants to portray them in such an elevated fashion that we have the highest portrayal of Mary anywhere in the canon, in the Christian canon. You have higher even in the proto-gospel of James, but that's second century. So in Luke 1:6, it literally says that Zachariah and Elizabeth were sinless, blameless, kept all the law. Now, the reason why the author of Luke wants that to happen is because if that means John the Baptist is born to an amazing family. It's almost like it's kind of like an immaculate conception. It's not really, but it's like an immaculate conception. Like he's born and there's no sin going on. And John the Baptist is now family with Jesus. I mean, they're cousins, you see? So here, Luke inserts this idea about Zachariah and Elizabeth, but actually call everything Paul says into question. Paul says no one could be righteous, no, not one, and no one can keep the law. And we're all sinners. Well, Zachariah and Elizabeth apparently were doing very well. You see? Now, all right. This is the prodigal son. So the story is interesting. The story is there to show contrast the Jews and the Gentiles. The Gentiles always do very nicely in the Christian Bible. And the Jews do not, except for those who become Christians, with one exception, Rabbi Gamliel. I'm not going to go into that now. But the problem with this son who leaves his father's palace, who goes off and does all these kinds of sins and eventually returns, and then God favors him. So the story is that is more favorable than the one who was just loyal all the time, is theologically impossible. Because in Christian theology, there's no works you could do that could save you. There's no initiative of yours that could probably earn you heaven. You can't buy your way into heaven. You are a sinner. You're lost. If the words I am conveying to you now are alien or foreign, you've never been to a church in your life. This is Sunday service, 10 a.m. every week. You are lost. You are a sinner. You have no hope without the cross, no hope without Golgotha, no hope without Calvary, no hope without the Lamb, no hope without the blood. That's standard fare. Well, how do you have the prodigal son? So that's an example where a device is used, a very powerful one. The Gospels are very well written, and they very well convey over a very misguided idea. But that story contradicts the Christology of Paul, that no one could ever find their way back to God on their own. So you see where it's going. That's, I find, much more interesting. But it is a Jew-Gentile thing. Like you have Pontius Pilate and his wife in Matthew. They think Jesus is innocent. And the Jews are screaming, crucify him, kill him, and we take it upon ourselves and our children. Matthew 27, verse 25. A passage that is cost us the fortunes. We've lost many lives because of that one verse. So that's always the Gentiles are simple. They may not be as clever as the Jews, but the Gentiles are more wholesome. It's the centurion who gets it, while the Jews don't.
Wow. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I appreciate that, Anubis, for the question and that long answer, Rabbi. I cannot read Hebrew, my friend Liren, so I'm sorry. I wish I could. And Rabbi cannot see the screen, so he's sincerely speaking from the heart and communicating what he has without being able to see the screen. So wish it was in English, my friend. Appreciate it though. Mr. Monster, were there any Jews who did consider Jesus to be the Messiah, like post beginning of Christianity?
Okay, so one really big disclosure here. There are no contemporaneous writings that are about Jesus or his followers that are non-Christian during that period. Nothing, zero. So we have on what are my sources? Like on what evidence?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that like I can't know. Like I much rather tell you I know this, but there are no contemporaneous historians that wrote a word, and there were plenty. And this land was really important, really important. And you had people like Philo of Alexandria who lived smack at that time. He was a contemporary, and if someone sneezed and someone else said Gesundheit, he wrote about it. He was born in the year 20 BCE and died in the 50s. He was like really around zero. So on what basis do I make make that claim? All that said, of course, of course. Why? Because you'll find Jews doing every stupid thing in the world. And there's could be little doubt that the Jewish people, if Jesus existed, probably did, some itinerant person in the north, and some people it's a desperate time. It's not like it was like now, it was like bad. You were living under the Roman Empire. Like you were under the empire. Things were crazy, insane. And if you had someone going around saying I don't know, the end of the world's coming, whatever, something that might get you crucified. I write about this in volume 1 of Let's Get Biblical, how likely have to have. So, of course, there were some Jews who, like today, they're like, what group don't Jews follow? Like, of course there were. I mean, I can't know, but of course there were Jews. And number two is that, like, who is Paul addressing when he is speaking to Jews? And no doubt he's addressing Jews in Romans 7, as we discussed earlier. And John is weird. I can't go into this now, but John, early John, you have Jewish kind of words that are used, which is very strange because in the same area as the prologue, with terms like Messiah and Rabbi is used. Which so, of course, there were Jews who followed everything. They were Hellenized Jews. That's who Philo was, and there's no doubt that's who Paul was. Paul was a Hellenized Jew who will claim to be a Pharisee because that's the best possible claim you can make. That's the highest standard. So, of course, but we don't have, we have,
Contemporary, right?
nothing. We have nothing. And
It's
what you find in Josephus, Antiquities was invented later. And anyway, whatever you want to think, if you want to think there's some part of Antiquities 1833 that's something, as some people think there is, fine. That's written in 94. It's written at the end of the first century. Josephus was born in 37, a really important year. He was born. It means he wasn't even born at the time that Christians say Jesus was crucified. He wasn't born yet. It wasn't conceived yet. So that's what we're talking about. But the answer is, of course, there were Jews who were following everything. We know that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Monster. He had a follow-up as well. Do Jews have an apocalypse other than Revelations? And I think he means Revelations. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Monster. But yes, there are other apocalyptic literature, Second Temple literature, of course, that goes into apocalypse type stuff that other than the Book of Revelation, of course. I think that's what he means. So I don't really think
the answer is it's not only yes, but Revelation lifts text straight from Daniel and Zechariah that are using this kind of apocalyptic language. Daniel even more intensely so. And that's 2,500 years old. That's Persian Empire. So that's really rich in apocalyptic language. Daniel has the most of it. So yeah. Now no one, just so you know, like no one today uses that kind of language. No one speaks that way. It's a
Right.
genre of language. We can call it just means a revelation. And so, and the idea of four and then the kingdoms and then the final triumph of good over evil in the world. Yeah, that's using very powerful symbols. Uh, is you will find the Jewish Bible and the whoever this John guy was who wrote the Book of Revelation. I presume his name was John. I'll take his word for it. He wasn't John, the son of Zebedee, but he was John. I assume he's using he has these books that are many centuries old that are holy books, and he's using them and lifting the language from it, of course.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for those super chats. Here's a question from me. Paul states in 1 Corinthians 9:20 that he essentially pretended to be a Jew and pretended to be under the law in order to win Jewish converts. What does he mean by that exactly?
Well, it's we have this problem today where there are missionaries who pose as Hasidic rabbis in the United States and in Israel. People who are wearing a kippah, like I would, wearing tzitzit really out so everyone can see fringes, everyone can see it, and dressing like a Jew, like as much as they can, so that they can get Jews to join their religion and say that you don't have to join another religion by joining this. You can be a fulfilled Jew, a messianic Jew, if you believe in Yeshua. I mean, it's just a selling point. Paul is saying that no matter how the gospel is preached, as long as it brings people to Christ, that's what matters. So therefore, he says, I mean, Paul is very transparent here. He says, to the Jew, I become as a Jew that I may gain the Jews. To those who are not Jewish, those who are not on the law, I come as one who's not on the law, so I may gain those who are not on the law. I could become all things to all men, that by some means I may win for them for Christ. I mean, you don't need me for this. I mean, you, the viewer, don't need me for this. Just read it there. It's in context. This is not like, rocket science here. Whether in pretense or in truth, the gospel is preached. It doesn't matter if your motives are, that's Philippians 1:18. It doesn't matter if your motives are sincere, it doesn't matter. The key, however it needs to be done, the ends justify the means. And we're dealing with this today. This is a cue which the Messianic movement is using in order to peddle in Christianity among the Jews. Now, one caveat: there are people, no doubt, who are in the Messianic movement who are listening to my words now and feel hurt by that. And I want you to know that it's not your fault. This is what you were taught. This is what Jewish people and non-Jews, there are many who are connected to the Messianic movement, they're just taught this, they're told this, and they really believe it. They're genuine. And I want to reach out to you. So it's not like people today. I mean, the guys who are dressing up as rabbis and are writing scrolls and performing circumcisions, I mean, that's scam. It's very, very bad. But that's just amped up. That's just these people who we've been uncovering in the last year or two. They're not even Jewish, but people in the Messianic movement and so on, by and large, especially the followers, meaning not the leaders, but the followers are genuine. They really, really believe this. They really buy this. But where it comes from is you use a different kind of language in speaking to a Jew than speaking to a Gentile. Comes from not just the Christian Bible, but from one of the oldest surviving documents in the Christian Bible. 1 Corinthians, that's mid-50s. That's really old. That's pretty much older than almost anything in the Christian Bible, with the exception maybe First Thessalonians. That's really old stuff.
Thank you. Mr. Evac, thank you for the super chat. Let me pop that up on the screen for everybody. What does the rabbi think about the parallels between Chabad, Messianism, and the development of early Christianity? Thank you both.
I didn't understand the question. Between Chabad,
Messianism, and the development of early Christianity.
Oh, now I know. Now it's Chabad.
Chabad.
Such a Gentile. What
CHA.
am I going to do with you?
I know. Listen, I mean, you got to
Come
bear
on.
with
It's
me.
really, it's time. It's time,
Look,
buddy.
you guys are smarter
Go
than
sit
us,
down.
okay?
You
Just
and me, we'll have a talk, and that's it. And you put you in the water. It's really, and that's it. All right. It's Chabad.
you better stop. Oh.
All right. Okay, so
Early
I
Christianity
know,
and yeah.
I know where he's going with this. So Chabad is a Hasidic community of Jewish people who are generally observant and who are followers of the teachings of of a number of rabbis. The last was the he's called the Rebbe reverently, who I met on many occasions. But there, just so you know, for those who know, there's no theological difference between what someone who might say I belong to the Chabad community believes, and what someone who comes from a Lithuanian. It's not. There's no real substantive difference. It's not like lahavdil, like Reformed theology versus if you're a Methodist, or if you're a Unitarian versus a Trinitarian. There's nothing remotely resembling that. But it is true that when the Rebbe passed away, so there were hopes. This wasn't a big deal, but when he was alive, there were people who thought maybe he will be the Messiah and reveal himself to be the Messiah. He was really one of the greatest people I'd ever encountered. And, maybe he will. Maybe he'll be it. And then he died. Everyone said that. Well, then this is a great rabbi who's not the Messiah. And the generation didn't deserve him if he was meant to be, and it's just not him. But there was a group that then said that, well, maybe the Messiah could die and he'll resurrect, and then so the idea of that of kind of like changing the rules did, to the dismay of the the other part of the Jewish world, was unfortunate. With Christianity, it's very hard to know, and I don't believe, this is why it's so different. I don't believe that the historical Jesus ever claimed to be the Messiah. Ever claimed to be the Messiah. And you're going, well, how could you know that? Well, the reason we can know it is that the Christian Bible is addressing this problem of why people are going, but why didn't he say he was the Messiah? And in fact, in the Christian Bible, when Jesus is asking, like, who do you say that I am? Like, nobody knows. And that does not occur early. That occurs right before the Passion. Okay. So nobody knows. How did that get into the Christian Bible? You see what I'm saying? I mean, how did that make it in? The first 8 chapters of the book of Mark, which is very intriguing. Like, nobody knows who Jesus is. Like, nobody knows the biggest secret in the world. And it's, don't tell anyone. If anyone figures it out, it's a secret. Why is that in the Christian Bible? How did that make it in? This is how you need to think about it. Because the Gospels are all polemical. It's there to make sense out of something that might not make sense. Well, that Jesus is the Messiah. No one thought that he was the Messiah. Or else, why would that be it? And then when Peter, we are told in Matthew 16, says, you are the Christ, Son of the living God. What is Jesus' response? We are told in Matthew, flesh and blood couldn't reveal this to you. What are you talking about? So, based on the Christian Bible, Jesus wasn't going around saying who he was. Right? Well, why is that in the Christian Bible? Like, how did that get in there? So, this is Occam's razor. This is like so simple. It got in there because the idea that he was the Messiah who died for our sins, a Christ figure, was an event that was an idea that was advanced after his death. So no, it's very, very different. The Christ figure in very early Christianity is the Christ Jesus figure. That's why Paul, I'm trying to think of every instance in the New Testament where Christ Jesus used. I don't know the number offhand. I'm going to make up this number. It's not correct, but let's say it's used I don't know, 80 times. I'm making that up. I don't know,
Right, right.
but it's somewhere up there. Right? That's Paul. Jesus is like a, it's like the common Christi. He's up there. It's in the Greek sense a semi-divine being, and that's how it developing. But we can see by an analysis of the Gospels things that are in there that are addressing a problem of why didn't anyone tell us that? Why didn't anybody tell us that he's the Messiah? Why didn't he say that? Like it should have come from him. That's the only way it could have crept in that could make sense to me. It's this to me is very transparent. Is a no brainer. So
Um,
it really is different. It really is
yeah,
quite different.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I got a question. This is going to take us into left field just briefly that I'd love to get your thoughts, Rabbi. And I've entertained various views and ideas and trying to figure out maybe what's going on in the New Testament. And there's a group of people who recognize that the prophets foretold that the lost Israelites would come back. So they look in the New Testament and they are still holding on to that idea. They say, hey, these lost Israelites, the northern tribes, are supposed to come back. And what they've done is they said that the Gentiles are apostate or apostatized Jews or Israelites who have been paganized, they're uncircumcised, whether they've reversed their circumcision with an epispasm or whatever. I'm just making the point that they're pagan, technically, they're Gentile, but they're really, their heritage goes back. And they think that Paul is trying to gather the elect, these chosen apostatized Israelites. Have you heard of this
I
before?
need to
And
go. Yeah, of course I've heard of it, but it's don't be offended if you haven't been into that. But it's yo-yoed up. Okay, let me just unpack this whole because this is Romans 9:25. This is really this is all right, let's slow this up. So it's very clearly prophesied in the Jewish Bible that the 10 tribes that were carried away by the Assyrian Empire roughly 2,700 years ago will one day be restored. That's huge in Tanakh. It's all over the place.
Mhm.
Famously, Ezekiel 37, two rods, one for Judah, one for Ephraim and his companions. The rod becomes one. It's this is huge. The gathering in of those. That means you are going to be restored, Isaiah 43. Everybody is coming back. Now, here's where it gets really amped up. Isaiah and Hosea lived at the exact same time. They were contemporaries. They both lived during the Assyrian Empire 2,700 years ago. However, whereas Isaiah was preaching here in the south, where I am in Judea, in Jerusalem, like in the south, Hosea was in the north preaching to the northern kingdom. Hosea in the first chapter is told to marry a prostitute. It was an example, like why would a prophet marry a prostitute? Because the northern kingdom was just really bad and they had prostituted themselves and they have chosen not the God of Israel, they've worshipped idolatry. And those adultery and idolatry are interchangeable in Tanakh. That's the metaphor. And here's where it gets interesting. And you're going to have kids. So here you have a prophet. These are the greatest men and women who ever lived with prophets. You're going to marry a woman who's a prostitute. So she represents the people who you're preaching to. When you have children, you're going to name them names like, you're not my people. I'm not going to have mercy on you. Lo ami means you're not my people. Lo rachamu, I am not going to have pity on you. These are names of children that are portents for the audience to whom Hosea is addressing. That is, that you are gone, you're cut off, and it's a prophecy that the northern kingdom is going to be destroyed and carried away. Okay, which occurs, as I said, during the reign of Hezekiah, Chizkiah Melech. Micha lived at this time. Now, Hosea 2 is very interesting. Hosea 2, the prophet then goes, just so you know, like after this rage of the first chapter, this is a very typical motif in the prophets. And that is, just so you know, there's going to be a point where you actually are going to come back. Just know that. You are going to be restored. Okay, that's how Hosea 2 begins. That's what it's all about. Hosea 2 is saying that actually one day those who are not my people will be called my people. I mean, literally, Hosea has a child called Loami. That's you, because you're bad, so you're not my people, means you're gone. There's no divine chariot going with you. You're gone. But now that we've had that raging chapter, we should talk about this because you are one day going to come home. You're going to return back. And maybe that's happening today as we see Jewish people coming back from North Africa, from India. Now, but it's talking about Jews, the northern kingdom. When I say Jews, I mean that not from the tribe of Judah, but Jews generically, which is used in Tanakh. It means in the Hebrew Bible, people from any tribe could be called a Jew. We're not going to discuss that now. Just leave it. So Hosea is speaking about the northern kingdom. Paul completely blows this to pieces, lies and cheats, and gets away with it. And in Romans 9, he's telling Gentiles that this is a prophecy about them. And it's not. It's completely ripped out of context. That's talking about the northern kingdom. It's not talking about pagans. They're talking about Gentiles. Now, there is huge prophecy in Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, about the non-Jews accepting the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and at the end of the day, there'll be only one faith in the world, and all the world will speak in the Safa Brura, a clear and pure speech, that there will be only one faith, and all the world will embrace the Jewish faith, or they'll be destroyed in the final war. So that's discussed a lot. But this text is talking about the 10 lost tribes, and Paul completely. We could talk about it on another show if you'd like to, but Paul, like so many other examples, completely misappropriates the text. And it's about Gentiles. It's not about Gentiles. About the 10 tribes that they're going to be restored back. It has nothing to do with it. Nothing. He literally stole it. And the thing, I'll end with this point. You know, in the New Testament, the Christian Bible, although the Jewish Bible is quoted, let's just say all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
the two characters that do this a lot are Matthew and Paul. Okay, Paul and Matthew. I want to tie this all together. So both of them sought. Listen very carefully. Both of them sought to convert their audience using Jewish scripture. Now, it's not like the Jewish Bible is never quoted in Mark or Luke. It is, but it's not used in the same way. Okay? Matthew is just completely unique in this way, fulfillment citations. Now, I want you to listen very carefully. We don't know who wrote Matthew, whoever wrote it, is quoting the Jewish Bible. And who is Matthew's intended audience? The intended audience are Jews. He wants to convert Jews to Christianity. He doesn't use those words, but okay. Matthew's raison d'être is to convince Jewish people to believe in Jesus. And that's why he starts the way he does. And here Jesus CV, and he comes from exactly the right family. You know, David, Abraham, just the right thing. And that's why even Matthew is not tracing Jesus is really Joseph's genealogy, not back to Adam the way Luke does, more universal. It's back to Abraham. Stop. Okay? I mean, this is really important for you to get. As it turns out, although Matthew and Paul are both engaging in the same kind of activity, Paul is going to be the great success and Matthew is the great failure. Because who is Paul's intended audience? Gentiles. Paul makes it abundantly clear, transparent, that his mission is for the Gentiles. He says it all over the place. Romans, it's all over. Okay? Now, if you're speaking to non-Jews and you start misquoting the Jewish Bible, guess what? People are going to buy it. Why? Because Gentiles, pagans, the word pagan doesn't even mean what we think pagan means. You just come from out of town, from the suburbs. They're illiterate. That's what the word really means. It has nothing to do with how many gods you believe in. So the point is, he's meeting people who couldn't tell the difference between chaff and wheat, genuine Judaism and Bible tampering. We can. They can't. So therefore, they fall for it, whether it's in Greece or in Asia Minor. They fall for Paul's chicanery. Conversely, Matthew sought to convert the Jews to Christianity. Matthew presents the whole mission as essentially for the Jews and not even for the Gentiles, where he has Jesus saying to his disciples, don't even go to non-Jews. Only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Don't waste your time with Samaritans, Matthew 10. Well, I'm not making this up. It's right in there.
Yeah.
Really very straightforward, okay? It's right in there. So, as it turns out, if the book of Matthew had never been written, listen very carefully, many more Jews would have become Christians. The book of Matthew contains so many lies, such a misrepresentation of the Hebrew Bible, and because Jews are looking at it, are presented with Matthew more than any other book in the Christian Bible, Jews are going, this is a lie. This is made up. No, it's not a prophecy about a Messiah born of a virgin. That's ridiculous. Not the Messiah born in Bethlehem. That verse in Micah is talking about King David's birth, and the Messiah is a descendant of King David. I'm not going to. It's all over the place. So therefore, Matthew, it could be said that there is no person in human history that's more responsible for the Jewish rejection of Christianity than the author of the book of Matthew, because he was selling this to people who could tell the difference between chaff and wheat, between genuine Judaism and Bible tampering. Conversely, it certainly is said, and correctly so, that there is no person more responsible for the conversion of Gentiles, of pagans to Christianity than Paul. He was the most important convert to Christianity. And it worked. Why? Because who's his audience? Gentiles. Gentiles, they'll eat it up. They have no clue what's going on in the Jewish Bible. And that's the bottom line of the whole story right there. It's so amazing, it's so fascinating that in a way the Jews have to say to Matthew, whoever you are, thank you so much. If you didn't put that stuff in the book, Jews would have been fooled because they would have been drawn to stuff that you'd find in John. They would be drawn to the ideas you find. The New Testament is filled with stuff that has an enormous impact on people. But Matthew made it implausible, impossible. No,
But does it in just on Matthew's note, because one of the things is the term Gentiles. I recommend anyone who wants to understand that word, read other literature, not just the New Testament, to kind of in the milieu, so you understand that this term isn't referring to ethnic descendants of Abraham. If there were apostatized, it wasn't limited to that. Would you consider, one question that I want to get into Matthew, and I don't want us to rabbit trail maybe, would you consider an apostatized Jew of any sort, let's say he decided he wanted to perform epispasm, reverse the circumcision, deny his law, God's law, and move away, would you call that man a Gentile?
No, God forbid. That person is a Jew who's sinning, and the prophets were all written calling these people to come home, to repent. And Isaiah addresses people who feel lost and cut off. He said, don't think that way. And he says, if you want to see God, I'm right here. And if you repent of your ways, I will forgive you. And why would you forgive me? Because my ways are higher than your ways. So Jeremiah is return to me and I'll return to you. So the people who are descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are called upon to leave idolatry. I mean, Isaiah has like so many delicious chapters pregnant with this message. They all do. So yeah, they're called to return. One point that people could be missing here, just 30 seconds. So unlike other religions, Judaism is an ethno-religious group. We're a people. We're a nation. We come from descendants of patriarchs and we're the children of Israel. It's why we're called that way. And we also have a faith. You can join the Jewish faith without joining the Jewish people, joining the nation, and then you call the Noachai, but you're essentially embracing Judaism as a non-Jew. And a person who's a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob can become an apostate and turn his back on God. And in fact, the prophets, the prophetic part of the Hebrew Bible, the Nevi'im it's called, are basically devoted to addressing these people. So that's like the big topic is return, repent, come back. You have a job, and that's to be a light to the nations. What are you doing there?
And for these Noahides, are there promises for them? Is there anything that is, because some people want to say, well, the promises are only for the children of Abraham. So there's no, like, the people who want to attach themselves to Israel and follow. Are there promises for them in the Hebrew Bible?
Yes, of course.
Okay, simple question. Just wanting
Yeah,
to answer.
I mean, like Job was a non-Jew. Job was a Gentile. You want to call him that? There's not a mention in the book of Job that Job was religious because he kept Sabbath. Nothing, not a word. Not a word that he was circumcised. Nothing. There's no ritual law that he kept that made him righteous. So, of course, technically Abraham wasn't Jewish. He was a Mesopotamian. That was the point.
Right, right.
So that's why Jews don't try to convert people to Judaism, because you don't need to become a Jew in order to be saved. The righteous among all the nations have a place in the world to come.
Thank you, thank you. And in Matthew, this is a big red flag to me, right? He's addressing the Jews. However, if that was his, I'm torn. I'm torn down the middle here, Rabbi. And here's why. In Matthew, he shoots himself in the foot by continuously kind of giving you a sneak peek. It's like the preview, but it tells you the whole movie before you even watch it. And he's like, oh, this centurion, he gets it. No one in Israel does. The vineyard people are going to get kicked out. New people are going to come in and take over the vineyard. Like, it's this idea that the mission is, at the end of the day, we've tried everything we can with you Jews. I've sent a mission on to go into all of Israel. Shoot, you would not have even gone through all the houses before the Son of Man comes. And in the end, what happens? Now it's the mission to these Gentiles. Go into the nations. But at first, only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It seems over and over, though, that this replacement theology is creeping its head up in Matthew. And I don't know if that's a later redactor or editor.
No, let me explain what's going on. I will end with this. I want to explain why is this in there. Remember, I explained that everything in the gospel is polemic. The writers of the New Testament had to deal with a monumental problem, a monumental question, whether it's Paul or whoever wrote the Gospels. The monumental question is on the lips of Christians today. They're asking their pastors this question. If Jesus is so transparently the Messiah, if everything you're teaching is true, then why don't the Jews, who have a reputation of being clever, and it's their Bible, like only they can read it in its original language, and only they're waiting for the Messiah. It's a completely, utterly Jewish thing. The idea of a Christ meant nothing in the Greco-Roman world. Nothing. It just didn't mean anything. Okay. Now, the big question is that if this is so obvious, so transparent, of course, it's on every page of the Hebrew Bible. And this is stated in the Christian Bible.
There's
The
thousands
Christian
of
Bible
mentions of
claims
Jesus.
365 prophecies of Jesus. Well, here's the math. 365 times 0 equals 0. 365 zeros. None of it is. But here, the issue that the writers of the New Testament have to contend with is, why isn't the people who were there, like who was in the land of Israel? Puerto Ricans? Who were there? People from China? No, it was the Jews. I mean, we were there. We were waiting for the coming of Messiah. We can read the book this is a thoroughly Jewish thing. And the Jews are not dumb. They're called a lot of things in the New Testament. They're never called stupid. Anti-Semites never call Jews stupid. They make that a rule because they'll throw you out of the Ku Klux Klan if you say the Jews are stupid, because then you sound stupid. No one says that. They say a lot of horrible things about Jews, but dumb is not one of them. So this must be explained away. And the only way to explain it away is that the Jews are really demonic, that the Jews really reject the truth. The Jews really can know that Jesus rose from the dead, and they're willing to bribe the guards to say otherwise. This is what's going on in 2 Corinthians 3. Paul is saying that there's a veil over their eyes, scales over their eyes. What does that mean? That's what's going on in Matthew. The idea is it's a setup, because you've got to show that the Jews are just spiritually blind. They're evil. And therefore, they deny what's so transparent to everyone else. Paul seeks to explain to Romans that it's a time that's supposed to spark jealousy among the Gentiles, whatever. But the point is, this is what is being addressed there. So it's like we went to the Jews, but they were so stubborn, and they're hypocrites and vipers. It's Matthew 23. And they're responsible for all the murders in the Bible, from Abel to Zechariah, the son of Barakai. It's kind of the wrong Zechariah, and that's Matthew 23:35. And Luke is going to actually correct that error in Luke 11:51, where his father's name taken out, because it's the wrong Zechariah. But that's just a dumb mistake. So the key is that is going on in the Gospels. You need to explain away why don't the Jews believe in this. Like if you're saying that like smoking doesn't cause cancer, well, why is like every doctor saying it does? You got to explain that there's some sort of conspiracy that all doctors are making this up because they hate, whoever makes Marlboro. It's this grand conspiracy of the Jews. That's why the Jews are willing to deny Jesus, even though they know he is. I mean, they're the devil, and they're called the seed of the devil in John 8:44. And there it is. That's why it's there. It's there to address the problem of why don't the people who should have believed in this don't believe in this. Period. End of story.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate that. Couple super chats. Doc Pluralmanat says, how can we trust the Khazari proof and discount thousands accepting the Gospels? Both could pervert a generational transmission of a miraculous event. Do you know what he's referring to?
No.
Okay, I don't either. Doc, email me afterwards. I'll look into further. Maybe I can give it to Rabbi later and he can respond to me and I can email you back with that. But I'm not really sure exactly what that is, my friend. I appreciate the super chat, though. Don't worry, your super chat's not in vain. So just, email me.
I didn't see the question.
ScholarVid, thank you for the super chat. He says symptoms: jumpy, agitated, euphoric, sleep deprived, talkative, engaged in dangerous behavior. Did Paul suffer from bipolar disorder? What do you think about the mental health aspects of trying to I know we can't nail the guy down from this, as if he's sitting in a doctor's chair, but do you think there's something going on here? His visions that might be epileptic. What do they call that? Lobal epileptic seizures? Or something?
No. Those things never happened. Those things are made up, but in the ancient world, people would just talk that way. People would just speak using that kind of language. Today, you get and that would not even be bipolar anyway. That means it would be a psychosis. It would not be the up and down of euphoria and depression.
What do you think his thorn in his flesh? This gets into the question earlier. So, ScholarVid, bear with me. Thank you for the super chat. But this really brings up what you said. We can unwrap Paul. And you said Paul is suffering from something.
Yeah.
A sin or something. What is it?
I mean, think it through. I mean, you just got to think, what would Paul feel very guilty about? Let's assemble this. This is going to be controversial, whatever I'll say. This is what I believe is the case. Can't be sure, but I'm pretty sure this is what's going on. Why is Paul so hammering in the homosexuality in Romans? What is he pushing up against? And what exactly is it that someone would discover about himself at a certain point and then discover that behavior is illicit and condemned in the Torah? I mean, I don't think this is
bacon.
This is no, it's not bacon. Right, it's not that. And this, I believe, is a no. And who would remain celibate? Just take that on.
Do you think that he was a pedophile?
No.
Okay.
No. I think what makes the most sense to me is what you're trying to do is you have all these problems and you're trying to assemble it all and say what answer addresses everything. And that means that's what you're doing. You're going, okay, we have all these questions, and then you're doing it's like an Occam's razor. What's the simplest explanation, which requires the fewest hypotheses, fewest guesses? What fits? So, what would Paul feel sinful about? And he would discover that's illicit. One part about the Roman world, that homosexuality it's not that it was protected behavior, now, gay rights and that. It was a common engagement in the Roman world. It just was. It was all over the place. We know that. Tacitus, in his book, talks about, he's just one of many, but he talks about how ubiquitous it was. Homosexuality, he was the important Roman historian. And he speaks about it in a self-deprecating way, contrasting it with the Germanic tribes who ultimately would destroy Rome, who were basically heterosexuals who had wives and worked hard and didn't hang out in bathhouses naked with other men in gymnasium and all that. Okay? So you have that culture in the Greco-Roman world. I mean, many of the great thinkers in Western thought were people who were homosexuals. And in fact, church fathers talked about this, that this really bothered them, and confessed and wrote books called Confessions in which they talked about it wasn't just being with women, and this was just there. And it's a different world. You have to divorce yourself from the world we're in now and creep into the Greco-Roman world to understand it. And to the extent that you're successful is the extent you'll succeed in this. So what would be bothering Paul about himself, and he would not be in a heterosexual relationship and tell others in 1 Corinthians 7 that, if you're married, fine, be good to your husband, but if you're virgins, ideal to be like me. Paul does that there. And he says, but if you can't control your passions, it's better to be married than to burn. It says that. He says that in 1 Corinthians 7. So I don't know. I mean, like, there's not. So what you're doing is you have all these question marks. Okay. Now, whatever I'm speaking to you, the viewer, whatever your views are, it's not germane to this. We're trying to examine history. What would a person like Paul discover about the Torah that would make him feel utterly irredeemable, utterly sinful, and his body wretched, and that there was no hope for him? What? He liked poor you jokingly. That's what it can't be. Jews love keeping Shabbat. We love it. Just if you're not Jewish, just take me for it. We don't find it a burden. We love putting on phylactery. We love praying to God 3 times a day. We love talking to God. We love the Torah. Okay, it's only the outsiders who think this is tough. We love it. Okay, so you could. Oh, I can't. It's so transparent to me that he was struggling with this, and that's why he pushes hard against it in his indisputed writings.
In like
And
for
this is why he
Romans
felt.
chapter 1, where
That's
he
right, Romans chapter 1. That's right, where he explodes with this, and then adds on female homosexuality into it as well, which is not in the Torah. And maybe that's why he just felt very comfortable around women, female companions, because it's like he didn't feel the stress and tension that a person might otherwise feel under those circumstances. But I think when you look at Romans 7 and connect that with other texts, like, what is bothering this guy? So he's making up stuff. He's making up visions. All that. That's all nonsense. He's trying to show that he's like everybody else, but he's the real thing and everyone else is fake. The key is that wants to advance the idea that we're done with the law. And we're done with the law, therefore the guilt is done with and
right.
set aside. But he won't confess it as other church fathers do. He won't. That is the only explanation that works consistently, that checks all the boxes.
So his message really worked for the Gentile world. We have a super chat from Crossover Maniac. Thank you so much. Are you familiar with the doctrine of the dual messiahs? One military leader who would die and prophet who would raise him from the dead?
Of course I am. Of course. And we'll make this the final, we'll lock it up here.
Yeah.
So it just don't buy that term dual messiah. There's no term like that in Jewish literature. That's a term that is created. It's a Christian machination that uses texts that are in Jewish literature, but not that. The term Messiah is used in the Hebrew Bible 39 times. Okay. In none of those occasions is it referring to the Messiah. This is very important that you get this point. We use the term Messiah and we will capitalize it, and we are referring to one person. In our contemporary world, when we use the word Messiah, Everybody knows who we're talking about. We may not believe in your version of the Messiah, but we know what you mean. Okay, whether it's the Messiah, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, but we know what you mean. Right? It only means in Tanakh, this was really not the case. Mashiach means to anoint. And a person who was in a state of leadership, most notably a priest, a descendant of Aaron, I'm one of those people, they were anointed for the task of carrying out God's work. You didn't have to be a priest, although the word is used more frequently in the book of Leviticus than any other for a reason that you just figured out. Term is used about a non-Jew, Cyrus, Isaiah 45, verse 1. It means he is anointed for a task on behalf of God. That's all it meant. Okay, it could be any person who had a prophet, king, someone who's carrying out God's work. Now the term Messiah we can capitalize and say it's referring to one. Okay, you need to know that, or else you'll not understand anything else. So therefore, Chazal means the rabbis of blessed memory. They use the biblical method, meaning that the word Messiah is not capitalized. Now, I'm using that as an example because there's no capitals in the Hebrew language. So that means when the sages in the Talmud, as an example, use the term Mashiach, they didn't mean necessarily the Messiah. It could, but it didn't have to be. Okay. So there is a person we're told about in Tractate Sukkah. It's part of the Talmud 52b that in the final war where Jerusalem comes under attack, a person will get killed in that war, in that battle. That means, so this is Zechariah 12. Zechariah 12 is describing the biggest mistake that the non-Jews could make. Here's a 2,500-year-old book describing that at the end of the days, Jerusalem is going to be the most important thing in the world, and nations surrounding Israel is going to go attack Israel over Jerusalem. That's key. And that God is going to strengthen the Jewish people, and they will be warriors like nothing else, strong like David, even like the angels. Zechariah 12, verse 8 and 9. It's right there, okay? There's the context. Now, in the final battle, a person dies, or it could be a group of people. The plain text means a great person gets killed in battle. And the people will look, bitu alai et asher dakaru, and they will look to me because of the one who was killed, thrust through, and they will mourn over him as one mourns over a firstborn son. And everybody will just be mourning over this fighter at the end of days, and that will trigger a repentance. And the repentance is what's necessary to bring the Mashiach. See Isaiah 59, verse 20 and 21, which Paul is going to massacre in Romans. Anyway, so when the rabbis say this is the Messiah, the son of Joseph, they don't mean the Messiah with a capital M, like there's another Messiah. They're using biblical lingo that any person who has a critical role of carrying out God's effort, this time the person is dying in battle, fighting for Jerusalem. So it's the one like really bad event in a war that otherwise is going fantastically, causes mourning, and that triggers a repentance of the Jewish people. Now, if you are trying to sell Christianity, you've got to engage in three-card Monte. You have to play a game called hide the ball. You've got to deal from the bottom of the deck. You have to know theological sleight of hand. That's what this is. Now, the people who propagate this, who peddle in this, they don't know what they're doing. They're just reading this in somebody's book and they're repeating it, and it sounds great. They're not reading the Talmud going, oh no, that's not what's happening here. People are just reading stuff on the internet, and if your rabbi is Google, you're in a lot of trouble here. Okay, so it's any person who has a role in God's activity on earth is called a Mashiach in Tanakh. As it turns out, there's just a craziest twist. That what I'm going to say, I don't even know if the viewers will believe me unless they look it up. But as it turns out, John will seize these passages. Only John will do this. Will seize these passages. I mean, of all the gospel, only he does, and tells a whole story that doesn't even exist in the Synoptic Gospels, and that's Zechariah is really talking about Roman soldiers that are piercing the side of Jesus, not crucifying him, but as a post-mortem check to see if he's really dead. So we have to break his bones or not? John 19, verse 34 through 37. So even though missionaries, here's another example. We'll close with this. Here's another example of where the Christian missionaries will say that Zechariah 12:10 is speaking about the crucifixion of Jesus, and the Jews recognizing at the end of the day that they were the Christ killers and just repent of it. This is any commentary, any missionary literature. Look up Zechariah 12:10. I guarantee you that's how it's sold. And this, my friends, contradicts the gospel. It contradicts the Gospel of John, because John is saying that piercing that Zechariah 12:10 is a fulfillment of is not the crucifixion. It's what the Roman soldiers do afterwards, because John needs to have Jesus, the Lamb of God, and he needs a method, a device to explain why his feet weren't broken, because when they wanted to bury crucified criminals quickly, this didn't happen often, but it could happen. They could break his feet. He couldn't sustain himself and just die of asphyxiation. They were considering that. But he needs to be the Lamb of God. That's unique to John 129, 136. That's completely Joannian. It's also 1 Corinthians 5:7, but it's the Gospels, it's only Joannian. And that's why he needs that plot device, which is saying that it's Roman soldiers, not Jews, that pierced him. And there was not even a crucifixion post-mortem. So I just want to show you how this gets spun into... Wow. So I want to convey this to you, the viewer. You have to go to primary sources. Something I've done tonight, something we've done together, Derek. That is, you notice that I'm not quoting this scholar says. You hear people doing, well, according to this guy, according to Albert Schweitzer. It doesn't make a difference. Like, let's go back to the original sources. I hope to encourage you who are interested in these things that really matter. They really matter, to really go back to the original sources. Like, I didn't quote a single scholar tonight. Why? Because, we want to know, what does the original text say? Let's go back to the original. Let's, read it for yourself, right? And on that note, I encourage you to buy my books. I'm kidding.
You can't see me, but I actually showed them earlier. Can I have a bonus round question as we go? One small one. I don't want a lot of time from you. Just a simple question.
Go for it.
All right. Why do Muslims keep Jesus in their tradition? I mean, even they had rabbis. They knew rabbis. They knew the rabbinic literature. At least it appears to me from the scholarship I've been digging into. They knew this. And they saw how Jews looked at Jesus as not the Messiah, but they venerated him in some degree. They seem to want to have a different kind of Jesus than what we even see in the Gospels. Can you give us just a two-minute something on this?
So this really fits so neatly into what we were just discussing. So Muslims are using the term Mashiach about Jesus, Isa, right? Christians are using the term Messiah about what they believe in. Jews use the term Messiah. We don't believe in Jesus. But the key is that Christians, Jews, and Muslims mean something really different. Thank you. So that's a great question. For example, let's go to the heart of the matter. To Muslims, first of all, Jesus was a prophet, no more. The highest form of prophet, a Rasul, which means he came with the Sharia, which means a message, a written message that was for the generation, whatever. But he was the highest order of prophet. That's what he was, okay? But Muslims don't believe that Jesus was the descendant of King David. So it's very different, really different. They don't believe. I want you to listen to that again. Muslims do not believe that Jesus was the descendant of King David or the fulfillment of a Davidic covenant. It's not because Muslims don't like David. David is a really important prophet in the Quran and in the Hadith and everywhere, okay? So it's someone very different who came with a message for the Jewish people, essentially, to repent. Jews didn't accept him, and he has the only thing you could say that in common is that there's the eschatology that Jesus will return in the Islamic view. He'll return and for 40 years will reign, get married, have babies, and then die, because he didn't die yet, and there's a grave next to Muhammad which is set aside for him. So Thank you. Whoever asked that question, thank you.
That was me.
So, so thank you, Derek. So that's perfect. So here, be very careful. We're using similar language, but Muslims detest the notion that Jesus was divine. The Trinity is attacked in the Quran directly, unambiguously, even more than Tanakh, because like the Trinity is spelled out in the Quran. So, and they hate Paul. Paul, correctly, Muslims are so right on this that they detest the idea of vicarious atonement. All that they see is and they're absolutely correct, a grotesque Paul iteration that, of course, emerges in the modern Gospels of Mark 10:45 and Matthew 20, verse 28, and so on. So that's grotesque to Islam. So, but we have to be very careful, because we're using the same word, but we mean something quite different. So there it is. Like, thank you. That's
Yeah.
that's the softball you threw me. Derek, it was really a pleasure having me on. It's a big pleasure to
Rabbi.
thank you.
I really
Thank
did
you.
enjoy this. Thank you so much
Yes.
thank you for doing a live, because usually we pre-record, and that's because there's just so many trolls out there, and I'm like, I enjoy just me and you without an audience talking. I really do appreciate it. If you guys are interested, he does have the books Let's Get Biblical, volume 1 and 2. You can see what he has to say about these things, as well as the webinar that's coming up. Make sure you guys sign up for that in the description with Bart Ehrman. Did the nativity story actually happen? It's an all-day event, so I'll be there. MythVision will be there. Go sign up. I have the Patreon with hundreds of videos. Literally, I could just keep going and going and going, load more and keep going. And a lot of them are not public, so exclusively for you to help keep me alive here at MythVision, as well as Rabbi Tovia Singer's YouTube channel. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Some of the videos he does, you may find interesting, no matter where you are ontologically. I really enjoy him and his friendship. I hope that you guys have really enjoyed this, and most of all, of course, you, Rabbi. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let's have you back again.
Always.
Thank you so much.
Blessings from Jerusalem. I look forward to seeing you here in the Holy Land. Thank you, and
Absolutely.
I thank your viewers. Those are really, really excellent questions, one after another.
Thank you. And if you have forgot, let me tell you a little bit of something. We are MythVision.